Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Self-Described podcast, where I have with me another very special guest, Wanako Oberhuber.
Thank you for having me.
How? Yes, it's a pleasure having you. You are you have a master's in anthropology, and you're also a practicing artist for some years. And we've been going back and forth and talking, and now we get the chance to actually record our smart sayings and all the very important stuff that we can impart on the world.
Yeah, the importance of it is up to our listeners how important it is for you. I will do my best to share things that I think are valuable to me and hopefully to you as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and hopefully for you as well. While we're talking.
Yeah,
So we've been going back and forth about the idea of anthropology and its importance when it comes to, sacred knowledge and folklore and things that people really into granted, uh, take it as granted, and look at it in face value. But nobody knows actually what's the importance of all the different types of traditions and rituals and all the different types of religions and worships and deities. But when we talk about actually the importance of man in the context of society, could you talk a little bit about yourself in the context of the society?
yeah. Well, this is a wonderful question because it's so large. Because there's so many societies in the world and so many peoples and so many different cultures and so-called subcultures and there's ethnicity in anthropology. There's so many different things about it. Culture is also a huge term. There's like, I don't know, over I probably think by now by 500 different definitions for culture, for instance. So I'm not going to go into all those definitions, but let's say, yes, it is important that diversity can be lived and enjoyed by as many people as possible. And I think that's really important. And I think anthropology can help by recognizing that scientifically and researching it. I personally researched about volleyball players and kite flyers on the Danube Island in Vienna.
Mm.
And I took, it was about 3 or 4 years where I would just join these people and join in the activity. So just a little to the context, I personally put up the idea that this free time activities are a part of what enables us to have a peaceful living together. So I was researching on that to see how peace is supported by this type of activity and being together. And I thought what's significant is that these are beach volleyball is a sport that people, have rules and that it should go this or that way. But the way it was lived is every group had different motivation to be there. Every group had a different way of playing, and one would adapt the rules slightly for whatever purpose one had. So there were people who were very into the rules and into the official rules, and it's only 2 players per team and this and that and that. they were much stricter about it, right? And then the person
Mm-hmm.
who wins gets to stay. The team that wins gets to stay, and stuff like that. So that can be adapted in a group that's not so competitive and not so into the exact rules. That may not be the case, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in this case, they had a group where the people wanted it that way, and so you really, if we're not a winner, you would be very seldom it would be your turn. So you could practice on the side and so on. Luckily, there was not just one court available; there
Yeah.
were three,
Yeah. Yeah. It
and
would
so
have
you
been a kind of a real estate dispute, shall we say?
yes, there were. You could have that feeling that you were left out or whatever because they would have their teams that they were used to and so on and so forth. So yeah, so it was, you had to follow those rules if you wanted to join in the game there. But yes, if there was only one court, one would have to find a way to get along because there were different
Mm-hmm.
interests and motivations for being there, right? Other groups were there to have fun, right? So it was not so important whether you won or whether you lost or this and that. And it didn't matter whether you had these rules of only two players. So that would be something that you might do at some point if you felt like it, but it was not necessary. You could also have 4 players or 5 per team as one saw fit at the time. So there it was all about having fun together. The other was fun too, but it just a different rules for having fun, right? So yeah. So then you'd play and you wouldn't do it exactly right and it wouldn't matter, right? So
Yeah, it
yeah.
wouldn't. So what are some of the psychological factors that go into the research of actual peer-to-peer interaction and in-group dynamic?
Yeah, well, in field work you need to there's various techniques, right? But one of the main techniques is participant observation or observation. Yeah, someone observing as a participant. There's 2 ways. One emphasizes that you're the observer and the other emphasizes the participation. And in both cases you need to take notes afterwards, right? Because if you're in an
Yes.
activity where you can't take notes while you're in it, that doesn't make sense. So you then make a protocol of what had happened and so on afterwards, either directly afterwards or when you get home, for instance, or later. But you have to try to write down what had happened, what the significant things, depending, of course, on your research questions and your
Yeah,
interests.
there's a great quote by William Wordsworth, the English poet, that talks exactly about, being able to observe and soak oneself in the moment, and then afterwards actually thinking about it, editing it, actually trying to express, to use better terms, accurate terms, So he talks about the kind of manic uh, prophecy that poets sometimes experience, extremely transient and transcendental types of event that poets experience, and they jot it down. And he says it's a bad kind of writing. You need to take notes, shall we say, and then you need to organize those thoughts in an orderly manner when
Yeah.
you are in a solitary situation. Yeah.
It's a little different when it's about science. So you want to be as accurate as possible, and get things straight. And later on,
Of
the
course.
idea is to analyze it. So first you participate, you work on it, and it's not about judging what's going on. It's about trying to be as accurate as possible about what is going on, what is happening, and so on. And so you do need to differentiate between what is going on and what you're thinking about it. So
Yeah.
and the good thing about field research in this manner, it's a qualitative method, is that you actually get to feel it, embody it, so
Mhm.
that you get a feel for what people are feeling, what they're
Mhm.
experiencing, what they're thinking.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean it's the same as you, but at least you are participating and you're getting a feel for it, and so you can go deeper into the subject.
Yeah.
Because
Um.
so that's the idea, and so this was very fascinating to see how people play these games. It's the same type of thing there, right? You know, people had to bring their own net along and things like that, right? Only the poles were there, and so you needed to share your own balls and so on. It was free, but you had to bring your own net because of vandalism, and you had to bring your own balls. So
Yes. Yes.
and
Very.
and
You had to bring your own net. Yeah. That's. Yeah.
so that's
That's.
that. So it was free and accessible, but you had to have things. So if someone had that, they were, so to speak, the organizer of the group. If they had
Yeah.
those things along, right, they could
They
organize
were
things.
the leader. Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah,
leader
they
has
had some more
all the
say than everyone else.
resources.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. The leaders
So
had the most research
yeah.
resources of all the tribe members, shall
So
we say?
I tended not to bring my own things along, so I would be dependent on being able to participate,
Hmm.
which was fascinating, of course, right? Because you get to know so many different groups and peoples. Because there were groups who were around music. They were musicians, basically, most of them. And
Hmm.
there was this guy who organized this volleyball playing as something they could do in their free time. And so that was all. So that they were more the type that you just play and enjoy the time together. And there was water, so you could go swim in between, which was great in the summer when it was really hot. So yeah, it was. So that was one group. There was other groups that came sporadically, right? Like
Hmm.
Christian groups who came to actually get people to join Christianity.
Okay.
There were groups like that. They would
To
play a
join
little volleyball. They would play a little volleyball.
Join the Christian team of volleyball. Yeah.
Well, the joining the playing is one thing, but their idea of sharing their ideas to people there was very
Yeah.
important to them. And they
Yeah.
were talking about things like audacity. That means you dare to
Yes.
actually show your color, so to speak. And so on. So they were training these young people to share the Christian ideas that they had. But
Yeah.
every group is particular, right? Some have
Of
more,
course.
are stricter about some things, some are other. So yeah, so you'd have
I
groups who
don't know so much. Don't know so much about audacity when it comes to actually showing any Christian uh, identifying attributes or whatever that means.
well, it was basically the idea of getting people to be willing to share about their Jesus, about Christianity,
Yeah.
their beliefs, right? And young people, it's not necessarily welcome everywhere, right?
Yeah,
So
it's called the proselytizing, of course.
right. So that's a challenge, right, for these people. So they were training them to dare to speak about it, to be open in the way they want it. Of course, I don't know whether that's really open or not. That's not something I'm here to judge, but the idea, and I think it's an idea that we all need when we want to write or when we want to share. We need to be willing to share the what's on our mind, right, in one way or another.
Of course. Yeah.
So
One of my professors said like, don't don't express your opinion in any way, shape, or form about the subject that you are studying. Um, and also, he said, don't bring your own personal biases that accrued through the years in your mind, in your developmental stage, into the research. So what do you think about a statement like that when it comes to anthropology? And anthropology is, in my opinion, it's a part of the humanities. It's also a science, a type of science, but it's also a part of the humanities. Um, what do you think about a statement like that when it comes to actually engaging actively in researching actual human beings in their ordinary lives? Is that acceptable to try and um, is that something that one would frown upon if you were to express your opinion?
Yeah, it's very important to make this difference in science, right? Like I was saying before, between your interpretation and what you're actually observing. And being a participant, you need to be authentic too. So you can't just, so if you're a beginner at volleyball, you're a beginner there, right? You're not advanced, right? So you learn things from the
A
people
novice,
there who know
yeah,
more,
novice.
right? So you're basically being trained as well. So you need to accept that experience as well. And we have a term called self-ethnography in anthropology
Mm,
as well,
mm-hmm,
where you actually are allowed to speak of your own experience as well, your own life
yeah.
experiences. But yes, the idea is that you do not judge, right? But of course, you're in the midst of it. So you will, like, if the one group you're not allowed to play because you're not good enough, right? Or no one will take you as a partner. These are experiences that other people will also have. It's not just your
Mm-hmm,
own. So yes, it's important to include the knowledge of that type of experience in the way you observe what's going on, right? In the way you participate.
mm-hmm,
Because yes, there are angers about that, where there was a point where there was only one court available. So we had to speak with each other about which group could do what when, right? Because if you just let the group that was so important to have only two people and always the same teams, and the winner stays and so on, and they were good players,
mm-hmm,
right,
mm-hmm,
compared to um, the others would have never, hardly ever been allowed to play, right?
mm-hmm,
So one had to speak about that in that case. But yes, so these are things that are important, and they're part of peace, right? They're part of the idea of having peace between peoples, right? I think
mm-hmm,
that shows, okay, we were able to find, the groups were able to find a solution, right? We were all part of
mm-hmm,
it, to actually, on the days where we only had one court, right, to actually be able to
mm-hmm.
play as well, right? And so
Yes.
yes, it's important for the scientific background to respect the idea of being objective, right? But in qualitative research, when you're in the field, you also need to accept who you are, right?
Yeah.
So you you
So,
you can't ignore that, and you will have biases, but it's
of
important
course.
to be aware that you are a person with your biases, with your thoughts, and so on, because you can do your best to split it from each other when you do your analysis and so on, right? And also in the way you describe it, like I said, you try to be clear about what's going on, and then you can have a section where you write what your thoughts were about it, right? And so on. And you have another option. You can do that. Of course, you can ask people, right? You could do interviews as well.
Mm-hmm,
I didn't use that in my research, but it would have been, that is a possibility. Like we're talking here, I could talk with various people who are participating and get their views on it. So that
mm-hmm,
would objectify it as well, would make it
mm-hmm,
so one could compare notes, so to speak.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but of
Because,
course, the way you phrase the questions, it sort of plants some seeds in the interviewee's mind that say of self-doubt, and they said, well, maybe it wasn't like that. Maybe it was a one way or the other, and I can't recollect it as plainly and as clearly as I can. So phrasing questions is very important.
Yes. And there's various methods for that and various ideas behind that when you do that. And there are the types of interviews where you just ask a big question and let people talk. And then you analyze how often did they talk about this or how much emphasis was on this or that, right? You can then analyze it and compare it to other people who speak about their lives or their experience, right? But you can also have focused questions, right? Or there's another method, of course, the quantitative method, that you just have a set of questions where they can answer with a spectrum, like I really mean it, that see it that way, or I don't at all, or whatever, like a spectrum of 10 different stages. You can do that as well and then analyze that quantitatively. But of course, like always, you have the issue with the questions. Are my questions actually making the people answer in a certain way or not? So yes, you need to reflect on that and be very aware of that when you want to have a good scientific outcome, one that is helpful, right? And the other thing is taking in account other people who have researched similar subjects. If you don't find anyone from that subject, then you have to find comparisons with methodology or the type of narrative that came up or whatever. So you always need to find other people who have done stuff. Like in my case, there were hardly any studies that were just on that, right? There was nothing there, but there were big narratives where they would look at a
Yeah,
culture and
there
they had
are
a
there are a lot of
sub-subject.
postulations. Yeah,
Then they'd have a,
postulations, theories, methodologies. Yeah, that are untested in the field, and need someone to recruit themselves to make that effort and actually perform the test. Get the get the funding, of course, that's the most important part. If you don't have funding, then nothing can be done.
yeah. So anyways, there's many ways to research it, like these questionnaires and so on. But it also is a good thing to just be there and participate, because the people you may at some point mention you're an anthropologist and they will know that you're researching, right? Because you need to be open about that. But
Yes,
but eventually they will live the life as they would if you were
of
not there,
course.
right? So that's the idea. One hopes that by being present there for a longer
Yes,
period of time, the groups will act naturally. And so you get a good picture of what's going on, right? Because just your being there could also influence what's going on, right? So,
yes.
so these
And
are all
I
things
think,
that we
yeah,
think of as researchers, right? So the idea is by immersing yourself for a longer period of time, one tries to avoid the issue of it not being authentic as the people would be, right? And usually people are willing to
hmm
help you. Like if you don't know
hmm
how to do something because you're researching, like the kite flyers, I had a
yes,
kite and then I brought it along, and then a person there was able to explain that it wasn't the type of kite I thought it was and how to fly it and to set it right and to show me all these things. So I
mm-hmm.
was, like I said, with volleyball, in a way, you're also an apprentice in field
hmm
research, because you are the one who
Yeah,
doesn't know about the culture there or the people there or
a
the
novice and
ethnicity.
amateur.
So,
Yeah,
so you're there to learn how it is done, right? To
yes,
whatever proficiency you're capable of, right? And
yes.
this is what you can bring back, right, in your ethnographic writings. You can speak
Mm-hmm.
about these things and share about it and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go into the background. Okay, what was this Danube Island all about? What was the
Mm-hmm.
idea of the city of Vienna to have that there? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
an artificial island, right? It splits the river and makes it possible for the river to, when it overflows, to go on the other
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
right? And things like that. And so the concept of the whole thing included the idea of free time, right? Because they
Mm.
had They have paths where people can roller skate, and they have meadows, and they have some restaurants and some other things. So the whole idea is it's almost like a place outside of the rest, right?
It's a nice resort, yeah.
So, but it's free, right? Other than the services that you have to pay for. So,
nice.
So that's really important to look at this background. How did this island come about? What was it for? And how has it been conceptualized? What do people think about it now? And so on and so forth, right? So that's another background you look into, right? So it's not just the research of what's going on there. It's also the research into what this place is all about, because it is a place, right? And a specific, and I chose a specific area. So of course I included a map so that one could, when one reads it, one can see where it was and so on. And the other side is the going into researching what do other anthropologists or other scientists have to say about similar topics. If there had been someone who had researched that particular area, then that would have been ideal, because then you could have a comparison of that. But that wasn't available, so you're a pioneer. You're the first one. But it doesn't mean that you have to make up all the rules or all the methods. You do have methods and
you're a
things
pilgrim.
to work with.
You're a pilgrim.
So yeah, that was fascinating. So I really got to see the dynamics, even though it's very banal, of how peaceful coexistence is supported by this. Because, you know, there were young people who had just fled Afghanistan who were also playing volleyball, right? Or this other group where they were from, like I told you, Christians, and they had a Romanian background. And so things like dancing was not allowed, or other things, right? So it was very, very interesting to find out. Not that it's wrong or right. It may be strange to me, but it was normal for them, right? So, so you learn a lot by participating and getting to know these different people.
Yeah. It's a particular type of Christianity. I can't put the finger on what sect of Christianity, because there are a lot. It could be.
I don't like to use the word sect in this context.
Okay.
That's to be determined by others, I think. But yes,
yeah, but
in this case,
are...
it was a Pentecostal group, for instance.
Okay.
But with a Romanian background, because I cannot say that all Pentecostals are this way or that way. I don't know.
Of course not. No.
So
there are
that was
Lutherans and Lutherans, Calvinists and Protestants and Seventh-day Adventists and
there's so many Baptists
Jesuits, of course, Dominicans. There are a lot.
There's so many. Anyways,
there are a lot.
So one of the other methods that I would use is, like, in some cases I would follow them. So I'd go along to their church and see what that's like, or things like that. So when there was the opportunity, or with the people who were musicians, I would go out with them and see what was that like, or go to some of their concerts, right, or things like that. So I didn't only stay on the island and only in the activity of volleyball and kite flying. In some cases,
so you said it's a man-made island, yeah?
Yes, man-made. So that was also a method that I used, so that I got more context. Not that I'm saying I wouldn't necessarily do that in other cases, but I was participating in the sense of getting to know the community even deeper. Of course, the main focus was the volleyball playing and the kite flying, but to get some more context, that was really helpful.
Have you read The Great Gatsby by any chance?
Yes, I have.
So I think I can sort of equate the anthropologist's role with Nick Carraway's role in the book as a non-engaging, very efficient, very professional observer, shall we say, outside observer.
Yeah, well, it depending on the degree that you do it with, you engage more or less. But that's not because I want to, as a researcher, want to influence anything, but because of allowing them to teach you things, or people to teach you things, or bringing your
Mm-hmm.
own ideas. You are engaging, and then you feel you are natural to the whole thing. You're no longer, this type of outsider nobody wants to have around them or doesn't feel comfortable. You want people to feel comfortable with you around,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's important to engage, but yes, there's varying degrees of engagement, right? One anthropologist may engage much deeper, and it also depends on
Mm-hmm.
your proclivities, right? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable with certain things, you will probably
Of
try to
course.
hold a greater distance in the way you
Yes.
interact, right? So it's very differentiated, right? And
Yeah, you'll
so
have a natural rapport, shall we say, that's created authentically without, you know, the rapport exists all of the time. There's a certain uneasiness, shall we say, to enter a new community, in a different culture. Yeah, so how can you go about it in a very I don't know, very non I don't want to say that, like a non-colonial way. I don't know. It's very weird to phrase it like that, but it's kind of apt, I think,
yeah,
to
that's an
insist.
important subject in anthropology. Are you coming from a Western bias, or are you coming from
Mm,
a
mm,
Eastern bias, or whatever, right? Into
mm,
where you're researching, and that's really important
uh,
to reflect on,
yeah,
because many
Occidental.
in many in at the beginning of or I don't know if it's the beginning, but in anthropology there were many steps into realizing, wow, we've been using this bias, we've been using that bias, and now we
Mm,
need to change that. Because, for
mm,
instance, even in the anthropology, when it goes about studying children in various societies, there was a
mm,
huge change, or in various ethnicities,
mm,
because at the beginning you were seeing children as children who are brought up by grown-ups and this and that and so on, right?
okay,
And then it changed to actually seeing children as being the masters of their own, so to speak, experience.
okay,
So this changed everything, right, in the research, because before you would tend to ask the grown-ups about the children, right,
mm-hmm,
and so on, and the grown-ups would be the experts on child education and what's going on and this and that.
mm-hmm,
And then it shifted so that you would participate in children's activities to get to know what's going on, right? So there
yeah,
was a researcher. She was in this society where children had their own groups. They would
mm-hmm,
they would organize themselves. There would be their own group leaders and so on. So the anthropologist would ask, "May I join you? May I come with you?" Right, to be able to get to know what's going on there.
yeah, yeah,
And that was in the hands of the children, right? Not, of course,
yeah,
it depending on the
Like in Lord of
culture.
the Flies, yeah,
Of course, depending on the culture and the law, you have to
uh-huh,
you have to get permission in various ways, right? So you do have to respect the local laws, right? Like here
of course,
in Europe, you would have to ask the parents, "Am I allowed to interview your child? Am I allowed to
yes,
publish this?" and so on, right? So if that's a law where you're researching, you need to follow those laws, right? No question about it.
yes,
But
of
that
course,
doesn't change the way you research, how that has changed. So children have become a much more respected. They're respected in their own views, their own language. They're allowed to use their own language, their own views, their own understanding, and
Yes.
their own activity. And
Yeah.
that's okay. So it's no longer the grown-up tells them what they should do, right? So that they
Mm,
can actually study properly. No, you go to them.
mm, mm, mm. It's more
And I think,
experiential. Yeah,
and there's
experiential.
other types of biases that have been overcome, like with gender studies, right? And
Hmm.
if you come with a certain view of it and you go to in a different place, you will tend to not see it the way it is, right? For them.
Mm, mm,
So one attempts as a researcher to get to know what the people are saying themselves, their
mm-hmm,
own explanations, their own description of what's going on. Because you want to get what they are thinking, what they are feeling, what they have in them, what is motivating them, and so on. So that this exploration of the language that is being used by the people involved in the activity is very important. So you're trying to get away from you're saying it's like that or that to,
mm-hmm.
okay, what are people saying? And so one of the methods in religion and consciousness studies, for instance, in anthropology, is to see it as if it were a stage or a play, right? So
Okay.
you don't decide whether it's right or wrong or whether it's real.
Yes.
You will use language from plays, right? From it's like so the
Yes.
for a ritual. So you'll say it's the introduction, the this and that, right? And then you'll describe it as neutral as possible, right? By using those terms, you're
Mm-hmm,
not
mm-hmm.
deciding whether what the person is saying is real or not, because that's we're a social science and not a natural science. So we are listening to what people have to say
Mm-hmm.
and their thoughts about it. And it's not our job as a scientist to decide whether it's right or wrong, or whether those gods exist or not that they're speaking of, right? That's not our
Yes.
decision. But we can research their experience, right? So they can describe it or whatever. You can describe what's going on. Okay, the person was listening to very loud music and then they started dancing and then afterwards they described they had a vision or whatever else, right? But I'm not
Mm,
the one to decide whether this vision is real or not, or the result of it actually happened. You know, that okay, my leg was healed, right? Okay,
mm-hmm.
you can say that, but I'm not a doctor to decide whether it was actually healed or not, right?
Mm,
Right? That would be another matter if so you're not there to decide that, right? But you can describe what's going on and you can research what people are saying about it who are experiencing it. And you can go deeper by becoming a participant. So if it's something that you're willing to participate in, that's a way to go deeper, right?
yeah, exactly. That's what I was wanting to get at. Actually, how much can one researcher really get to know to be a part of the tribe in some form or fashion that doesn't break that rapport. Even though it's very easy to frown and scold a stranger that comes into your tribe and try to they don't know what his motivations are, his intentions, why is he choosing us as his subjects for the study. But what can one do? What are some of the things that are um, not allowed or legal or stuff like that? That doesn't even come into play, of course. But what are some of the things that you can do as a foreigner, even as a Westerner, an Occidental person, as opposed to an Oriental uh, one? What are some of the tips for someone who is trying to get to know a new culture through their practices and rituals and customs and so forth, etc., and so forth and so on?
Yeah, well, of course, the baseline is you need to be respectful. You need to
Mm,
respect that for these people, it's valid, right? Their culture is valid and their
mm,
values are valid and their institutions are valid for them,
mm,
right? So,
of course.
so even if you think because it's done differently where you come from or where you've what you've experienced so far, you need to be able to respect that. So that's the baseline, the respecting what is there, right? And how the people see it and so on. And the other thing, of course, you have to stay authentic. So if it's something that you cannot participate in or feel comfortable participating in, you may choose not to research it.
Of
You
course.
have to be very, very clear about that. Um, and of course, illegal things, you're not going to do, you shouldn't be doing things that are illegal.
Yeah, of course not. That's out of the question, and it's not a. It doesn't
Yeah,
come into play,
right. It
as
shouldn't come
as
into
I've
play.
mentioned. Yeah.
Um, so it's very important, this respectfulness, this willingness to learn. Like I said before, you need to be willing to learn, right? Of course, not breaking yourself and doing something that would be impossible for you to respect yourself with, just
Hmm.
to fit in. That that you have to find how far you can go,
Hmm.
right? Being
Yes.
authentic with yourself. So, but yes, this willingness to be a beginner, to have
Hmm.
no idea. Okay, I'm willing to not know what is going on here and to yeah, learn it, learn it from scratch.
Yeah. Um. So I think we've talked. I got into to the precipice of my knowledge when it comes to anthropology, and I think I'm wearing it out. So we can. It fizzles down to nothing at the current moment when it comes to anthropology, at least. So let's jump forward to one of your personal, maybe hobbies or professional hobbies, which is a kind of has to do with art and painting. Could you talk a little bit about that side, that passion that you have? Sorry.
Sure, we can talk about that. So, art, for me, there's a connection because I was researching people playing, right, in a
Mm,
playful place, and I think that's very important in art as well. This this ability to imagine, to to allow things to
you're
take
muted.
on an
Wanako, I
appearance.
can't hear you. You're muted for some reason.
Do you hear me now?
No, I can't hear you.
It's on my side. It's unmuted. Very odd. Do you hear me now?
I can't hear anything you're saying. I don't know why.
You didn't hear anything? Okay.
Sec.
I don't know what to do.
Try it. try speaking.
Hi. Do you hear me? No.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know either.
Okay. Doesn't matter.
So
Try to speak.
I'm here.
I can't hear you.
No.
I don't know why.
Okay. I guess we could restart it.
Okay, so I'll end this and I'll start a new. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No. Now I can hear you
Oh,
again.
okay.
Well,
Okay. Well,
that's
I
weird.
guess you'll have to cut out a bit now.
Yeah. No worries. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, this it's also helpful in anthropology to have this willingness to see things differently, because playing includes this ability to make up a whole new set of rules, right? A whole new set of things that lead to something. And you do that for every piece of art that you create. You are actually setting up rules. Like if you're painting, you might have rules like I'm going to do it in dashes, or I'm going to use lines that are curvy more than the straight lines, or whatever. You might have some rules that you set up where I want to get the colors right, or I want to have the shapes perfect, right? So you will always be focusing on something else, and you're putting up rules for that. And this flexibility is something that you need as an anthropologist too. So this open-mindedness, this willingness to say, okay, this could be explained completely differently as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's important in art and in anthropology. And I like to see myself as open-minded. And
yeah, that's wonderful.
Art,
yeah, everybody should.
And so in art, I like to explore various subjects. For instance, when I was writing poems, and
Me too. Yeah.
and I'd been reading poetry that was like absurd poetry, where they would put things together differently and so on.
Yeah.
And then I decided, okay, I'm going to try something. I'm going to take what's going on right in this moment. I'll have a notebook, and I'll add that spice of absurdity. And so,
okay. What, for example? Yeah.
So when you had a plate of noodle soup,
okay.
I in the poetry I would say something like noodle braid.
That's
Okay?
cute. Yeah.
So I'd play like that, and so so you have these poems,
it's a
which
great metaphor.
often
Yeah.
are just have a few words and things, and they paint a picture, but they paint a picture that includes certain felt senses. Because if you say noodle braid, like a hair braid, right?
Yeah.
So you have the association with nicely braided hair. You have the association with food, right, and eating. You have the association of the fork pulling up the noodles, right? And so you have the warmth
It's a great
of the
metaphor.
food.
It's a great metaphor.
And
Yeah.
so this play, I played with that. So that's one way I set up rules, right? I had this rule. I'm gonna use these connections. I'm gonna put connections that you can think of but are unusual, right? Or not the ones you usually would. But if I had said noodle soup, that might have been less interesting, right? To me, at least in these rules.
Yeah.
According to these rules, that would have been not so
if
fun.
you were to write like a ramen bowl, maybe it would have been more interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's one way I would play. I would make up some rules, and then I'd play with that in my art. So so in painting and in other arts and singing and so on, the same thing, right? So if I was involved in there was someone who invited me to be part of their electronic music and be the voice, and
Cool.
I just played along. So it's like jamming sessions.
Just to implant your voice into the music itself. Yeah.
Actually, we were both doing at the same time. So I was singing and they
Oh,
were
cool.
doing their music, and it was like a jamming session, live jamming session for other
So
people
you
to
were the lead
be part of.
vocals. You were, yeah. There, you
So
were the soloist.
so to speak, yes. But of a different type of a kind of music that
Yeah, yeah.
I was not necessarily used to, but I was willing to engage in this new set of rules,
Mm.
right?
Oh, so that's another study that you did?
I didn't write about it, but so no, not in the
Ah,
formal sense, but I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
general rule for as
That's
an
cool.
artist
That's
as
cool.
well,
Yeah.
to immerse yourself into various sets of rules and try them out,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because every art form and every specifics in arts has their own set of rules,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
either you're making them up or they're given by what you are doing, right?
Yeah. There are
Because
traditions. Yeah.
if you're kneading a piece of clay, you need to knead it, right? You have to grab it, you
Yeah.
need to push it together, you need to shape it, and so on. So there's all kinds of steps that are given, but which
Mm.
shape you choose to make or what you create there, that's up to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're so unless you're following a certain rule. Maybe you're in a class and they're saying you need to shape a giraffe, right? But
Yes.
but every giraffe is different, right? And you may want one person may want to shape the giraffe the way they think it looks,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you might also exaggerate certain aspects. Like you might say, okay, I'm going to make a giraffe, but I want to exaggerate the neck so that it
Mm-hmm.
appears even taller and the body even smaller, or whatever else, right? So there's, depending on what you want to convey are or you want to express.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and so that's really fun. So I think
Mm-hmm.
art has this aspect of being able
Yeah.
to make up your own rules.
That's a great definition of art, one which I'm unfamiliar with, which it seems to be like an ingenuity that you've created. Uh, it's something that, you know, I forgot. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I derived
Uh,
this idea from the child's play that you call make believe.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
so you
yeah.
make up your own rules and then you
Of
play
course.
by them and then you can change them. So
Yes.
the fun thing is you can change while you're playing, you can change the rules as well.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
dependent on negotiation with yourself or with other or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's a process.
Of
And
course.
so that's how and I think that's also something that you can use to describe human activities too, because even though uh, a group may appear to be this way or that way, right?
Mhm.
They are
Mhm.
also changing the rules as they go,
Mhm.
and that's normal. It's not
Yeah.
so. Even if you are coming to research there, it doesn't mean that because you were there, things changed as you were there. That
Mhm.
is something that shouldn't happen,
Mhm.
because that's also this ability to adapt to become flexible about things and so on is also a human trait.
Mm. Yeah. It's one of the most the most human of traits that one could have. You know, everything is tied up in some sort of way or weird fashion. Every affliction, social interaction, social status, feelings, desires, uh, a place of employment. Everything has to do with, that sense of being able to, ad- being adept at adapting and seeing the advent of different phenomena, and actually measuring what is better, what is not so much, not so good for me to do, um, or to pursue, because I need to focus uh, on my own survival at the end of the day, and I will do anything to, find that that balance, the the uneasiness of balancing your foot on a head of a pin. That's you should find that right spot, Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing
Uh,
thing. Yeah, it's very
yes.
amazing. This
Yes. So I want
adaptability.
to, yeah.
Yeah, I
What,
like that.
what do
The-
if you have any closing statements, arguments, thoughts, things to share, promote, go for it.
Yes, I think that's a very important point, is this flexibility and this willingness to engage in transformation, or in the willingness to get to know things, to explore things. And I think that's an approach that is helpful in many ways, is this willingness to explore. So that's something I do with the podcast that I publish as well. I have many different guests from all over the world and speak about their lives and how they came to see the world the way they do today. And it's really, really fascinating.
Also, it's a great title, The Holy Scripture of Curriculum.
Yeah, the
Joy.
Holy Spirit's curriculum of joy. Yeah, and
Yes.
I so and I've and I think that's something I want to share, this willingness to explore and to get to know each other in so many new ways enables us to get to know ourselves. And I think that's common both in every endeavor of exploration, is you
Mm,
really get to know yourself more and more. And so that's
yeah.
something that anthropology, of course, gets you to, challenges you to get to know yourself in the science of anthropology, but in arts as well, because exploring various ideas and rules and so on also is something that gets you to go to who you are. What do you feel comfortable with? What you don't feel comfortable with? And and being able to live with a certain degree of discomfort as well, because otherwise you can't explore everything,
Mm,
right?
hmm. Of
But
course.
also with this excitement, because the discomfort and excitement might, um, you can judge it one way or the other. You might be able to take discomfort and see it as excitement.
Yes, they might, yes, they also that, but they might also spring forth something lovely and exciting that you didn't know you actually possessed within yourself
Yes.
as a human. There are a lot of abilities and traits, they say that we use only about 2% of our potential when it comes to brain power, quote unquote. Uh, but we are not like enlightened beings. We are still physical life forms who need to be tended to, need air, water, food, resources. They need shelter. They need companionship. They need a sense of community, and they need a sense of purpose at the end of the day. And I think that's the most important kind of thing, that you need to have purpose in everything that you do. Purpose and a drive, a real drive to pursue your own self, shall we say? Pursue what's beneficial to your own self. So I want to thank you so much. You have been a great guest, and I'm hoping that we'll have and I think we have a nice we have a great prospect for future conversations about interesting and varied topics. but more focused and streamlined.
Yeah, we can talk about all kinds of things. So yes, this is wonderful.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.